I would like to invite Danilo Taino, who's a senior correspondent from Corriere della Sera and an expert in international politics and global economics. And I wanted to give a picture of what the international system and the world look like right now. Um, so Danilo, I think because we've closed with China, I think we should start with China. So what in your view, this sort of Cold War between China and the United States, um, who's going to win, and did the pandemic change sort of the outcome of this Cold War?
Hello, Margherita. Thank you for having me here. I think that mm, we cannot say that there will be a winner in this situation. I think that both China and the United States are coming out of the pandemic, if they're coming out of the pandemic, weaker than before, with a weaker standing in the international arena. I think that China has to pay the price of not being transparent in the situation, and particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, in the situation in Wuhan, and the United States are paying the prices of deciding not to lead the world. Usually, the United States were the leaders of the world in the big crisis. It's been so in Africa, it's been so in Southeast Asia with the tsunami a few years ago. This time, the United States wasn't there. Trump administration decided that the America first was the mantra of the administration. So they decided not to engage in an international effort to deal with the pandemic. So I think that both China and the United States will pay a price for this in their international standing. There are also other countries on the other side that have done very well or quite well in managing the pandemic. I think to Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, a few countries in Europe maybe. So I think that these countries will think that you can live well without being too close to the two big superpowers. And I think that probably in this situation, a future of not a bipolar future, but a multipolar future is thinkable.
Right, that's quite interesting because, of course, the pandemic um, has definitely changed the whole international order, and it's kind of interesting to think that had that not happened, we might be in a very, your comment would be maybe very different. Still talking about China, I think it's worth to mention, of course, China is very efficient, and this derives also from an intense government control. Recently, we've seen Jack Ma, who's the founder of Alibaba and Alipay, being investigated after making comments about the Communist Party. Now, in the long run, is this intense government control that is now, making China so efficient going to be an issue? Because, freedom of speech is kind of what characterizes capitalism, and everyone says capitalism leads to it, to more freedoms. So is this gonna end up hurting China in the long run?
I think that the government, the Chinese government personnel, is quite solid, and they also have good skills. This is absolutely true, but we also have some problems in China, I think, and the first one is that the corruption is very widespread. And when you have a state-controlled economy, the corruption is going to be widespread and will be widespread. And this will be a problem also in the future. It has been a problem in the past, and it will be a problem also in the future. And second, you can be an extraordinary bureaucrat, but you cannot guess which innovations will be the future innovations. I don't think that a bureaucrat could have thought of the smartphone, for example. To be innovative, you need an environment favorable to innovation. You need venture capital. You need a strong financial system, and particularly you need an open society, and you need the freedom of thinking and discussing and choosing what to do. When there is a bureaucrat of the Communist Party that decides what the innovation will be, I think that you are not going to have great and real innovations. China has been very, very good in catching up with other countries. I think that they are investing a lot of money in science, in research, but I think that if you don't have the freedom of choosing what to do, and if you must leave the decisions to the government or to the party, I think that you will have a big problems. I think that China has an extraordinary economy, not because it is a centralized power, but because they opened up the markets with Deng Xiaoping at the end of the 70s and in the 80s, and they freed the energies that in the country were present. But the reason is the opening up of China that has made the country strong.
Okay, so of course, we're talking about China opening up, but in the last probably 5 to 6 years, we've seen some nationalist approaches to international relations. So we've seen, of course, Brexit that came into place a couple of weeks ago, and Trump's policies of putting tariffs on China, and the whole America First policy. So why is globalization feared by countries that, like China did? They really benefited from globalization. So why is it now feared? And can it really be slowed down? Or is there actually just no point in trying to have more nationalist approaches?
But I think that globalization is already retreating in some way, in many ways. There is a political backlash in Western countries, in particular, and by the people who didn't benefit from globalization. This is a reality both in Europe and in the United States. And I think that the populist vote is in part, at least, dependent of this perception of globalization. Probably the reasons are also different, because technology is one of the big reasons for this backlash. But in any case, for sure, globalization is not loved by a big chunk of the Western population. And the pandemic is also destroying parts of the veins of globalization, and particularly the value chains and the supply chains that are the global skeleton of the global manufacturing. And the global manufacturing is working around that. I think this will be a problem probably also for the fashion industry, I suppose. So also this element is going to destroy parts of the globalization. And then there is the conflict between the United States and China that is developing. It was developing with the Trump administration, at least, in the direction of a possible decoupling of the business environment of the United States and the business environment linked to China. So This is a possibility still now, also with the new American administration. But I think that, yes, I think that the globalization is retreating and probably will retreat more in the next few years. There are a number of things that a number of policies that can be developed in order to deal with this situation, but right now, I think that a big number of countries are answering to this situation and to the populist surge with more nationalistic policies.
Okay, so in terms of, we're talking about the new administration in the United States, which came to be in a very non-peaceful way. We've seen the attack to the Capitol, and suddenly, you know, various millions of people did still vote for Donald Trump. So sort of what's happening there? What is going to happen? And, you know, of course, now the Democrats in the United States have both the House, Senate, and of course the presidency. How hard is it going to be for the new administration to implement serious reform? And will they actually implement serious reform that will facilitate trade, and that also will sort of make the United States be, you know, more loved, I guess, in the international system? Because we've seen, of course, this summer a lot of protests, and during the past 4 years, we can't say that, you know, Europe wasn't worried about what the politics in the United States were.
I think that this is an Obamian administration for the personnel that is entering it. A lot of people were linked to the Obama administration 4 years ago and before that. I think that since the end of the Cold War, America has been without a serious, coherent foreign policy. And in the last 12 years, I think that the retreat of America from the international affairs has been quite pronounced because of the backseat approach of Obama and because of Trump's America First. So this puts, I think, Biden in a difficult situation, but also he has a number of problems, domestic problems, that he has to deal with first. We have the pandemic, we have the vaccine campaign, there is the economy that is not in a perfect shape, there are the racial issues, and the political divisions within the country. So I think that the first, the biggest problems now from the Biden administration will be this. I don't know how the reforms will be. I think that probably the United States needs a number of reforms, internal reforms, but it depends in which direction Biden will drive and how much he will drive this necessity. From an international point of view, I worried quite a lot from the absence of the United States on the international stage. I think this is dangerous and this is risky because of possible wars. When the United States are not there, there are a number of strong men in the world that could try to gain some advantages. I'm thinking to Xi Jinping, I'm thinking to Putin, to Erdogan, to Al-Sisi in Egypt, to the Ayatollahs in Iran. So I think that the situation could be quite dangerous for Europe and for the world, for the absence of the United States from the international stage. I think that the paramount the paramount issue for the administration will be China, of course, the relation. Here there is probably a bipartisan consensus to contain China. There will be differences between the Trump administration and Biden administration. Maybe Chinese government, Xi Jinping and Biden will speak and will develop some sort of deals on climate change. But in general, I think that the United States will be quite strongly opposed to the emergence of a Chinese hegemony. We will see also some movements probably in Southern America, in Venezuela, and maybe Cuba. We must remember that the new, the new Secretary of State has been the person sent by Obama to open up the relationship between the United States and Cuba a few years ago. So I think that probably a new initiative from Washington will be taken towards Cuba. And then there is the issue of Iran, of the nuclear program in Iran that will be dealt by the administration. But I think that the paramount issue will be China, of course.
So many questions that we could ask there and expand on so many topics, but we don't have a lot of time left. So of course, I think we must speak about Brexit, because we've seen some effects of Brexit already. Some are negative, but also we can argue that with the whole issue about on the vaccines that he's seeing the European Union. I suppose that's definitely something that leaving the European Union in that sense definitely benefited the UK. Now, what can happen there? What would the best scenario be for the United Kingdom? Who should they be sort of speaking with right now? And how is Brexit going to affect Europe, and how is Brexit going to affect the United Kingdom in the short and in the long term?
I will try to be very quick. I think it is very sad that Britain is not in the European Union anymore. I loved Britain in Europe, and I think that the role of Britain was really important for shaping the policies within the European Union. And I think that without Britain, the EU will suffer quite a lot, particularly in opening up the markets. I think that probably Europe will be in a worse situation than before now. Also, the dynamics within the European Union have changed very much for the absence of London there. What about Britain? I think that everything depends by the approach of this government and the Johnson's government and the next governments. If Britain will be open, I think it will manage in some way to substitute and to develop a new substitute Europe, I mean, at least in part. And the price to pay would be quite high in economic terms, but I think that the choice was a political choice for the majority of the British people. So the issue is dealt now, and I think that the difference will be done by a nationalist government or an internationalist government. And it is not only a question of having free trade agreements with other countries or with other regions that are important, but also to give the impression or not that the country is open for business and the country is attractive. Last week, I tried to send a box to my daughter that lives in London, and the box returned because of custom regulations that I didn't know nothing about this. And that's a problem. And I think that in general, there is a problem in Europe, at least, for understanding how much Britain will be open in the next few years. I think also that the approach of Britain to, for example, the students will be a sort of acid test to understand how much Britain wants to remain attractive, because it has been very much attractive for Europeans, but not only for Europeans in the last few years. So I think that the country will have a few problems. It will have also a lot of opportunities if the country remains open, internationalist, and not mercantilist. Just to cite the professor that spoke before. In the end, I don't think that Scotland will leave the United Kingdom. It's too costly.